What if Howland Reed raised Jon Snow in the neck, where no Southron army could reach him? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The yard below the Tower of Joy is quiet now. 9 men are dead in the dust of the Red Mountains. 6 of them rode south with Ned Stark to find his sister, and 6 of them lie at his feet now, their blood already darkening to rust in the late afternoon heat. 3 Kingsguard died to put them there. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, who came at 2 men at once with 2 blades, and was faster than anything Ned had ever seen on a battlefield. Sir Oswell went. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, the White Bull himself, who fell last and fell hard and took 2 of Ned's companions down with him before he went. They are all dead, and 2 men are still standing. Ned Stark stands in the center of that yard and stares at nothing. He is 20 years old, and he has just walked out of a fight he had no right to survive. The man who saved him is a few feet away, crouching beside Arthur Dayne's body, wiping a knife clean on the hem of his own cloak. The knife is still red. When Ned had no moves left, when the Sword of the Morning was already raising his blade for the final stroke, the Lord of Greywater Watch came at Dayne from behind and drove that knife through the back of the knight's neck. Quiet and fast. The way Cranogmen fight. The way people fight when they know they cannot win it straight and clean. That was the moment the fight ended. Ned has not thanked him yet. He is not sure what words would cover it. The Lord of Greywater Watch stands, puts the knife away, and says nothing. Ned goes inside. The room at the top of the tower smells of blood and something heavy that hangs in the warm air. Lyanna Stark is lying on a bed soaked dark with it, her dark hair matted against her face, her chest barely moving. She has always had the Stark look. She looks like their father. Around the jaw, she looks like Brandon. She looks like someone who deserved more time. Ned crosses the room and takes her hand, and she turns her head toward him, slowly. And her eyes find his. Her grip is weak. But it is there. She says his name first. Aegon. His name is Aegon Targaryen, Ned. She makes herself say each word clearly, carefully, the way a person speaks when they know they will not get another chance. He was born in love. He is their true-born son. Promise me. Promise me you will protect him. Ned promises. He says it twice so she can hear it. He would promise her anything in this room. He already knows this promise is going to sit inside him like a stone under his ribs for the rest of his life. Lyanna Stark takes one more breath and does not take another. Ned sits with her for a long time in the quiet of the tower. There is nowhere he needs to be, and nothing useful he can do, except stay. Outside, the Lord of Greywater Watch waits in the yard without making a sound, because he is the kind of man who understands when a moment needs to be left alone. The infant is on a folded blanket near the window. Small and dark-haired and furiously alive in the way that new things are alive. He barely cries. He watches the room with wide, dark eyes that seem too steady for something born only a few hours ago. Ned stands and crosses to him and picks him up and stands there in that bloody tower room holding the child who is going to be the most dangerous person in the 7 kingdoms the moment anyone outside this tower learns his name. He carries him down the stairs and into the yard. The Lord of Greywater Watch stands when he sees them coming. He looks at the child and then at Ned's face and does not ask what happened above. He already knows. He was close enough to hear what was said before the fight started. He knows what name the Kingsguard were dying to protect and what that name means. Ned says it plainly. Robert would kill him if I bring him north. If his name reaches King's Landing, Robert would kill this child before he could walk. The Lord of Greywater Watch says, "Yes, I cannot hide him at Winterfell, Ned says. There are too many people. Too many lords who would carry the news south for a reward. One whisper is all it takes. The Lord of Greywater Watch looks at the child for a moment. Then he says, "There is one place in the Seven Kingdoms where no Southron army can reach, and no raven can find you. I think you already know where that is." Ned knows. He has known for the past minute. He looks at the child in his arms. He thinks about Winterfell, and what Cortland will say, and what she will not say, and about Robert sitting on the Iron Throne right now, already celebrating, already the king of a realm. For a moment, the thought of handing a newborn to someone else to raise stops him cold. But only for a moment. His mind is already made up. "Take him," Ned says. "Keep him hidden. Tell no one his name." The Lord of Greywater Watch takes the child from Ned's arms and wraps him in his own cloak against the chill of the mountain evening. He holds the boy with the easy steadiness of a man who does not rattle easily. The infant makes one small sound and then settles as though he has decided that this is someone he can trust. Ned stays with Lyanna. He wraps her bones for the long journey north, with a quietness that costs him more than the fight outside ever did. There is no bastard at Winterfell. There is no Jon Snow. There is only a brother bringing his sister home, and the story he will tell is simple. She died in the Mountains of Dawn, and the child did not survive. Robert will grieve in his way. Robert will drink. Robert will never know. The Lord of Greywater Watch does not take the northern road. He does not go near the causeways or the King's Road or any path a raven could describe in a message. He takes the paths that look like shadows, paths that smell of standing water and green rot, winding south and east into the deep swamps of the Neck, toward a castle that is never in the same place twice. It is always moving, but the Lord of Greywater Watch always knows where it will be. Ned Stark rides north alone. He carries his sister's bones and a secret that is going to outlive him and a promise he will keep until the day it costs him everything. The yard below the Tower of Joy holds 9 dead men. 2 men walked out of it alive, and only one of them rode away, carrying anything worth saving. The castle comes out of the mist like something that has always been there and was only waiting to be found. Greywater Watch sits on a crannog, a floating island built over centuries from bundled reeds and packed earth and the slow accumulation of everything the swamps give up in the eastern headwaters of the Green Fork, deep in the Neck where the water maze is at its thickest and no outsider has ever found their way in and back out again. The walls are low and practical. The whole structure breathes with the river, rising and falling with the season, moving when the season says to move, and stopping when the Lord of Greywater Watch decides to stop. No raven in the 7 Kingdoms can find a castle that is never in the same place twice. That has always been the point. The Lord carries the infant across the plank bridge and into the yard, and the crannogmen come out to see what he has brought back from the south. They are small people, the crannogmen, brown-skinned and quiet and still in the way that people are still when they have spent generations learning that stillness is a kind of armor. They look at the Lord and they look at the child, and they do not ask questions. He has not invited. He brings the boy inside and sets him down and calls him John, and the name settles over the child like a cloak. No other name is spoken inside the walls of Greywater Watch. No raven will carry this child's existence to King's Landing. The castle will have moved again before anyone who wants to find him learns where to start looking. John's first years in the world are water, reed walls that creak when the marsh wind pushes through them, fires that smell of peat, The constant low sound of frogs that the Cranagmen eat and fish with, and the cold smell of bronze from the knives, and the three-pronged spears, and the small hollow reeds that the older warriors fit to their lips when they want to kill something quietly at 30 yards. Nets drying on poles in the grey mornings, boats so narrow a grown man has to sit very still to keep from tipping them. And beneath everything, water. Water that looks firm, and then is not. Water that swallows a man whole and leaves no trace beyond a few slow bubbles rising to the surface. Water that the Cranagmen read the way the Southron lords read maps, as a record of who owns what and who is safe and who is not. In the neck, loud things attract attention. Attention, in the neck, is rarely a good sign. Jon learns this before he learns to talk. He learns to sit in a reed canoe before he learns to walk with any reliability on dry ground. The Lord holds the boat steady, and the boy grabs both sides and watches the water below, with grey eyes that are already at 1 year old, too steady for something his size. He is not a loud child. He watches things. He watches the reeds and the water and the Cranagmen moving through their days with the focused quiet of a child who has decided that the world contains information, and the trick is learning how to read it. By his 2nd year, he can paddle himself in circles without going over. By his 3rd year, he has stopped falling into the bog when the ground goes soft and has started reading it instead. He crouches and presses his palm to the surface and feels whether it will hold or take his foot. He gets it wrong. Sometimes he gets wet, he gets cold, he gets up and tries the next path and learns the difference. He is already at 3, taller than the Cranagmen children his age, dark-haired and grey-eyed and serious in a way that the Cranagmen recognize and respect. Because in the neck, a child who makes noise without purpose does not last long in the training yard. The Cranagmen watch him with patient, evaluating silence, and they decide he is worth teaching. Mira Reed is born a few months after Jon, when the late autumn storms come off the bay and rattle the castle in its cradle. She comes into the world with a sound like she already has opinions about it. She has brown hair and grey-green eyes, and a face that will eventually be both serious and quick, though it takes her a few years to settle into it. She is the Lord's daughter, and she grows up beside Jon the way children grow when they share a world the size of a floating castle, completely, without ceremony, as though the arrangement was never in question. By the time they are 4 years old, she can throw a net and hit a floating log at 15 feet. She is faster in the water than Jon. Jon minds this less than you might expect. He is already learning that there are things she is better at and things he is better at, and that the gap between them is more useful than either of them being best at everything alone. The Lord of Greywater Watch begins teaching them young. Not with formal lessons, with the way Cranagmen teach, by saying a thing plainly and letting the terrain prove it true. He tells them the same thing more than once, because it is the kind of lesson that only lands properly when it has been tested. The ground is the weapon. The swamp is the army. A man who knows where he is standing beats a knight every single time, because a knight in a swamp is not a knight anymore. He is just a man in heavy clothes who cannot see what is under his feet. Mira hears this and immediately wants to know how to throw the net farther than she can throw it. Jon hears it and goes quiet in the particular way he goes quiet when a simple thing is being said with something much heavier packed inside it. He does not know yet why the neck feels like something he is supposed to understand at a level that goes deeper than bog paths and muck. He just knows that it does. Meanwhile, far to the north, Ned Stark does not send ravens. Ravens cannot find Greywater Watch, and he knows it better than anyone. What he uses are riders. Men he trusts enough to stake a child's life on, who know a set of paths through the outer neck, and a go-between who carries word the last mile. The messages are short. They always say the same things in different words. The cover holds, no one suspects. There is no bastard at Winterfell, and therefore there is no child for Robert to find. People across the north and south find it quietly strange that Honourable Ned Stark never brought home a bastard from the wars, and they attribute the absence to shame, and Ned lets them. He says nothing to correct it. From the outside, it looks like grief. From the inside, it is one of the most precisely kept silences in the Seven Kingdoms. The Lord reads these messages in the great hall of his moving castle, and burns them one after the next and says nothing to anyone. Jon is 4 years old. He does not know about the messages. He does not know there is a man far to the north who knows his real name and pays in reputation every year to protect it. He knows the bog paths within half a mile of the castle. He knows the frog call that means rain is 2 hours out. He knows the difference between the water that holds and the water that doesn't. He is learning to read a world built to be unreadable, and he is getting very good at it. The year Jojen Reed is born, the bogs are quiet. He does not cry when he comes into the world. The women who attend the birth say later that he arrived with a look of concentration on his face, as though the birth itself were a problem he was working out, and then he looked at the Lord of Greywater Watch and went still. The Lord names him without ceremony and watches him closely from the first night. By the time Jojen is 2, he has a reputation among the Crannogmen as a child who watches things from a very long way away. He is slender and brown-haired, and when he sits in the reeds at the edge of the water, he is so still that the water birds do not flush when he moves. He seems to be listening to something no one else in the castle can hear. The Lord of Greywater Watch finds this familiar in a way he does not talk about. He has been reading the bogs all his life. He knows what it looks like when a person is paying attention to something that is not in the room. The trembling spells begin before Jojen can talk. They come without warning. A sudden stillness first, eyes rolling back, and then a shuddering that goes through him like a cold current in a warm marsh, and then he comes back. He is never frightened when he comes back. He is quiet. He looks at whoever is sitting closest, and then he goes on with whatever he was doing before, with the same concentration and the same distance in his eyes. The Lord sits with him after the worst of the spells and does not interfere. He seems to be waiting for the boy's gift to sharpen, the way a bladesmith waits for the metal to know its own shape before he tries to work it. The first dream Jojen can describe happens when he is 4 or 5 years old, in the last of the bog-quiet years. He comes to the Lord of Greywater Watch in the early morning, when the mist is still on the water, and says he saw a boy in the dream, a boy with grey eyes. Not sleeping grey, he says, with the precision of a child who has been thinking about how to say this correctly for some time. Awake grey, watching grey, the kind of grey that looks at you and sees more than you showed it. He says there was something burning in the boy's chest, not a fire that hurts, a fire that loves the cold around it, the way an ember loves the cold air that keeps it alive. He tells the Lord. The Lord is very still for a long time. Then he says, "Good, remember it exactly. Tell me if you see it again." Jojen does, on both counts. The Lord of Greywater Watch carries this new piece of knowledge back out into the bogs and adds it to the weight he has been carrying for 4 years, and he says nothing about it to anyone. The 3 children grow up the way children grow when they are all each other has. Jon is the oldest by the length of a neckwinter. By age 5, he is already taller than most Crannogmen children his age, and by age 6, taller than some of the men. He has dark hair and grey eyes that miss very little, and a steadiness in the bogs that the Cranachman recognize as something earned rather than natural. He has learned to read the mud by pressing his palm flat against the surface and feeling for the give underneath. He still makes mistakes. He still gets wet. He gets up every time and tries a different path and learns what the last one taught him. Mira stays ahead of him in the water. She is faster in the channels and faster still with a net, and she has a laugh that startles the water birds off the far bank and does not seem to trouble her in the slightest. By age 5, she can hit a floating log at 20 feet. She has brown hair and grey-green eyes, and the patient Cranachman attention that in the neck is more valuable than speed, because in the neck the patient ones survive longer than the quick ones, and Mira has both. John does not mind being beaten by Mira. He minds being beaten by the bog. Jojen watches both of them from the bank. He sits in the reeds with his feet in the water and watches them race and argue and fall in and climb back out, and he looks pleased in a quiet, private way, like a person who is looking at something that matches a picture he has been carrying in his head for a long time and is glad to find the picture was right. In 289 AC, when John is 6 years old, a river trader working the Causeway Road comes through the bogs with news he has been telling at every way station between Moat, Caelan. Balin Greyjoy of the Iron Islands has declared himself king. His ships are burning the western coast. Ned Stark has called his banners and the north is marching. The trader says all of this at the Cranachman's small causeway post, where news arrives by mouth and travels no farther unless the Cranachman choose to pass it along. The Lord of Greywater Watch does not call his banners. The neck is not marching anywhere. The neck does what the neck has always done, which is wait and watch, and make itself very difficult for anyone who wants to cross it in a hurry. John hears the word Greyjoy for the first time sitting outside the way station with his boots in the water. He asks the Lord of Greywater, "Watch what a Greyjoy is." The Lord says, without looking up from the piece of netting he is mending, someone who forgot that the sea was not enough and wanted the land as well. He says it with the flat plainness of a Cranachman discussing weather. John turns the answer over in his mind for most of the afternoon. The war ends within the year. Robert Baratheon wins it, as he wins most things, in this period of his reign. 3 months after the war's end, Ned Stark's coded message reaches Greywater Watch through the usual chain of bog path riders and Cranachman go-betweens. It says, translated from the Lord of Greywater Watch's terse summary into plain speech, "The rebellion is done. The banners are back. The secret holds. Hold fast." Later that same season, John walks too far into the black-green water while following a bog lizard that had caught his attention. The lizard is at home in this depth. John is not. The marsh pulls at his boots first, then his shins, then his thighs, and then the ground simply is not there, and John goes under. The Lord of Greywater Watch pulls him out by the collar. John comes up sputtering and angry. Not frightened, which would be the reasonable response. Angry. He is angry at the bog for opening under him, and angrier at himself for not reading it right. He shakes the water out of his ears and looks at the stretch of bog that swallowed him the way a person looks at something that has made a fool of them in front of others. The Lord of Greywater Watch sets him on a dry reed bank and says, "Every surface tells you what is beneath it, every surface, if you know how to ask. The water speaks, the mud speaks, the color of the surface tells you the depth. The depth tells you the ground. The ground tells you whether you are standing in the neck or lying in it. You are not listening. John sits there with marsh water dripping off his collar and stares at the stretch of bog that beat him. Then he starts listening. He studies the bog language the way he studies everything the Lord of Greywater Watch teaches, with a serious, unhurried attention that the Cranagmen recognize and respect. Because in the Neck, the people who learn slowly and learn completely outlast the people who learn. By the end of that season, he knows which surface color means shallow and which means dangerous, which reeds mark firm ground and which mark nothing under them at all. He knows the smell of deep water versus the smell of buried gas. John never falls in the same way. Twice among the Cranagmen, that is considered sufficient. Formal training begins the year John turns 7, when the Lord of Greywater Watch decides that the children are old enough to stop learning the bogs by accident and start learning them on purpose. He lines the 3 of them up in the castle yard on a grey morning, with the marsh mist still sitting on the water beyond the walls, and sets out the Cranagmen's weapons on a reed mat in front of them. Nets folded flat and precise, weighted at the edges for throwing. Bronze knives, short and practical. The bronze green dark from the wet air of the Neck. 3-pronged frog spears, taller than John, taller than Mira, exactly as tall as the men who carry them, because the Lord has not yet had one made to size. Round leather shields, small and light, and the hollow reeds, no longer than a man's forearm, that the older Cranagmen carry, tucked in their belts and never take out unless they need to, because what comes out of them does not give you a second chance. The darts for training are practice versions, no poison. The Lord makes this clear before he makes anything else clear. You do not train with the real darts, not while you are learning, not ever. Because a dart that grazes you in training kills you in training, and that is not a lesson worth teaching. The children accept this without argument. Jojen accepts it with particular enthusiasm, since the dart is the only weapon in the set that is small enough for him to hold comfortably. Jojen holds the frog spear politely, considers it for a moment, and sets it down politely, and goes back to watching. He holds the net with more interest, but less coordination. He holds the bronze knife and turns it over once and sets it down beside the spear. The Lord watches all of this without comment. He had not been expecting anything different from Jojen, and what you are not expecting cannot disappoint you. John and Mira take to it. Mira masters the net first, which surprises no one who has watched her in the water. She has always had a feeling for weight and trajectory, for where a thing will go if you let it go the right way, and the net rewards this. She learns the throw in pieces, the grip, the first rotation, the release that opens the net into a full circle before it hits the water. She practices on a floating log tethered in the castle's sheltered channel. By the end of the first month, she hits it more than she misses. By the end of the season, she hits it almost every time, and she is already working on speed, on throwing twice in the time it takes most people to throw once. John masters the 3-pronged frog spear. This also surprises no one. He has the reach for it, the extra height that marks him out among the Cranagmen's children, gives him a leverage advantage that the shorter fighters do not have, and the Lord teaches him to use it, to plant and drive rather than swing, to use the bog itself as the second weapon, by positioning himself so that an opponent who closes with him is stepping into ground that John has already read, and the opponent has not. John trains until his hands blister, and then until the blisters callous, and then until the movements stop requiring thought. He is a serious student. He always has been. But weapons are the first thing he has studied, that he takes genuine pleasure in, and Mira notices this before he does. In the second year of formal training, the Lord of Greywater Watch takes the older children, John and Mira. Jojen is too young yet, or perhaps simply too interested in other things, to the sheltered part of the bog where the crannogmen do their poison work. He shows them which creatures to take and which to leave. He shows them the sequence, patient and precise, from collection to preparation to application. And he shows them what the prepared poison does to a piece of meat he sets out in the water, and how fast it works, and how little of it is needed. John watches with careful attention and asks careful questions. Mira watches with slightly more caution, which the Lord approves of. Caution with poison is not timidity. It is respect for the thing you are working with. John has an eye for the distinctions that matter. This frog, he says, picking one out of the collection box with his bare hand, this is the one that kills. He turns it and looks at its markings. This one merely stings. The Lord confirms both identifications and then tells him to put it down and wash his hands, and to remember that even the one that merely stings does not feel pleasant. Jojen, who has accompanied them for this lesson despite the age restriction, sits on a dry patch of ground at the edge of the work area and names every specimen he sees with the focused precision of a maester who has wandered into entirely the wrong discipline. He seems to know some of them already when the Lord asks him how. Jojen says, "From the dreams." The Lord does not ask which dreams. The night in September of 292 AC, when John is 9 years old, is not like any night that came before it. He does not dream the way he has always dreamed, the ordinary half-remembered dreams of a boy who has spent his whole life in a moving castle in a swamp. What happens instead is that he is somewhere else. He is low to the ground, and the ground is cold and wet and smells completely different than it has ever smelled, because he is smelling it with a different nose. He is a bog lizard moving through the eastern shallows in the dark, hunting, tasting the air with a tongue that tells him things his tongue cannot tell him, seeing the warm shapes of small things under the water in colors he has never seen before. He is the lizard, and the lizard is hunting, and it is entirely ordinary and entirely extraordinary at the same time, and then he is back in his own bed with the castle rocking slightly under him and the grey first light coming through the reed slats of his window. He lies there and knows exactly where the lizard is. He can feel the cold water on scales that are not his scales. He can feel the memory of seeing in those other colors. He says nothing. He gets up and trains and helps with the morning work and says nothing about it to anyone, and he tries to put it out of his mind, and this does not work, because the thing you try to put out of your mind is the thing your mind keeps returning to. And by the evening of the same day, he has accepted that the night happened, and he still does not know what to do about it. Jojen is watching him across the supper table with a particular kind of attention. The next day, Jojen comes to him in the reeds and says, "You were somewhere else last night. You weren't dreaming." He says it without accusation and without surprise, the way he says most things, as though he is reporting an observation that he has already fully processed and found unremarkable. John says that he does not know what Jojen is talking about. Jojen lets this answer sit for a moment, and then continues as though John has not said it. "I've seen it in my dreams, a boy who can walk in other skins, walk in them while he sleeps. I've been seeing it for 2 years. He looks at John. I thought it was you. Now I know it is." John says nothing useful. Jojen does not press him. That evening, Jojen goes to the Lord of Greywater Watch alone and tells him what he has said to John and what he has seen. The Lord listens to the whole account without interrupting. When Jojen is finished, the Lord says, "I know. Thank you for telling me." He means both of those things. He had been expecting this, not because he was certain, but because he had carried the probability of it in the back of his mind since the night at the Tower of Joy, when he first understood what kind of blood ran in this child, and what gifts that blood was known to carry in the people who bore it. 2 days later, the Lord takes John out on a small reed boat to the quiet part of the bog, the stretch of still water to the east of the castle, where the reeds close over above your head, and the sound of the marsh is the only sound. He ships the paddle and lets the boat sit in the current. He says, "There is something I have been waiting to tell you until you were old enough to carry it." He says, "Your mother was a woman of the north, a Stark of Winterfell. She had the courage of 10 knights and the stubbornness of 30. She chose what she chose, and she did not apologize for it, and she died before she could be sorry." He says, "Your father was a great lord who is dead." He cannot say more yet. He says, "There are people in the world, important people, who would kill you for who you were born to be, not for anything you have done, for what your blood is. That is why the castle moves. That is why no raven can find us. That is why I have never taught you your full name." John sits with this for a long time. The water moves under the boat, with the slow patience of a thing that has been moving for thousands of years. He asks only one question. He says, "Was she good?" His mother. Was she a good person? The Lord of Greywater Watch looks at him and says, "She was the truest thing in the world." John nods. He picks up the other paddle and helps row them back to the castle, and he does not ask again for years. By his 11th year, John has become exactly what the Neck set out to make. He can throw a net in the dark and hit a floating log he has not seen in 3 minutes, adjusting for the current and the wind off the water the way most children adjust for nothing at all. He can drive a 3-pronged frog spear through marsh water at an angle that compensates for what the water does to a straight line. And he can do it. He knows every named bog path in a 5-mile radius of wherever Greywater Watch is currently sitting, which is not always the same place it was sitting the season before. He swims faster than any child at the castle, which took him longer to achieve than the weapons did because Mira had a 2-year head start, and Mira does not give back ground she has taken. He speaks the way the Cranagmen speak, quietly and with deliberate economy, the way people speak when they measure words, the way they measure provisions before a long march through uncertain country. He says what he means, and he means what he says, and he does not waste time on the words in between. The Cranagmen find this quality natural in a boy raised among them. Mira finds it occasionally frustrating because she has known him for 11 years and can tell the difference between the silence that means he is thinking and the silence that means he is done thinking and does not want to continue. Shojin finds it interesting. Jojen finds most things about John interesting. He is 9 years old and already carrying more interior weather than most people carry at 30. And watching John is one of the things that organizes his interior weather into something legible. The day it happens is a cold morning in late 293 AC, grey and still, with the mist sitting so thick on the northern bogs that you can lose sight of a person at 20 yards. John and Mira are running a patrol along the northern edge of the bog paths. The Cranagmen keep the outer perimeter moving, regular sweeps to read what has changed in the water and the reed beds, what animals have passed, and from what direction. It is ordinary work. They have done it hundreds of times. John is 3 paces ahead of Mira, reading the ground as he goes. When he stops, he does not slow down and then stop. He stops the way a standing stone stops, completely, without transition, one moment moving and the next moment not. Mira comes up behind him and almost walks into his back. She pulls up short and looks at him. His eyes are open, but they are not looking at anything in the northern bogs. They are not looking at anything she can see. She has seen this before, smaller versions of it after certain nights, in the way he moves and holds himself in the mornings before he shakes it off. She recognizes it. She does not call his name. She steps to the side, where she can see both him and the bog ahead, and she waits, and she watches the reeds. The grey wolf comes out of the tree line 100 yards to the north. It is not a dire wolf. It is smaller than that, leaner. The kind of grey marsh wolf that runs along the northern fringes of the neck, where the swamp gives way to harder ground, usually keeping well clear of the castle and the Cranagman's patrol lines. It steps out of the tree line at a walk, head low, moving with the unhurried care of an animal that knows exactly where it is going, and it crosses the open ground between the trees and the edge of the bog path without speeding up or slowing down. Then it sits down. It looks at Mira. It has John's stillness. It has John's way of looking at a thing from a very long distance, with an attention that does not blink and does not waver. It sits there in the cold morning mist, a grey wolf at the edge of the Cranagman's patrol line, and it looks at Mira with eyes that she has been looking into across supper tables and training yards. Then John takes a breath. His eyes come back to the northern bogs. He is breathing hard, the way he breathes after a long swim, and he is shaking slightly in the shoulders. He looks at the wolf, and then he looks at Mira, and the wolf stands up, turns back toward the trees, and walks away the way it came. John watches it go. He knows where it has come from. He knows what it has been eating over the past 3 days. He knows how many miles it has covered since the last sunrise, and from what direction and through what kind of ground. He knows these things the way he knows where his own hands are, as a simple fact of being in a body. He is shaking and breathing hard, and he knows all of this about a wolf that is no longer in sight. Mira reaches out and shakes him by the shoulder, once with both hands. She says, very simply, "I know." John looks at her. He says nothing. She says nothing more. They finish the patrol. The Lord of Greywater Watch brings all 3 of them together that evening in the great hall, with the fire low and the castle moving under them in its slow, imperceptible way. Jojen is 8 years old. He already looks older than 8 in a way that has nothing to do with his size, which is slight, and everything to do with the weight he carries behind his brown-haired, serious face. The Lord tells Jojen what happened on the patrol, though from Jojen's expression it is clear that he already knows, at least the shape of it. Jojen looks at John and says, "You're a warg. You walk in other skins." He says it without alarm and without theatrics, in the same tone he uses to name the species of bog lizard he has just observed. It was always going to be this way. I dreamed it before I had words for what I was dreaming. I'm relieved it's happened. I was beginning to wonder if the dream was wrong. He pauses and then adds, as though this requires clarification, "My dreams are not wrong." John says, "I know." He says it to Jojen, but he is looking at the fire. The Lord of Greywater Watch dismisses Mira and John after a time. Jojen stays. When it is just the 2 of them, Jojen tells the Lord about the dream he has been carrying for the past month, the most recent and the most vivid, a white wolf running across black ice that stretches as far as he can see in the dream. On the wolf's back there is a rider, and the rider is made of fire, not fire that burns things, fire that is the shape of a person. The rider is going north across the black ice. Jojen tells the dream the way he tells all his dreams, as a fact about the future, not a hope or a fear, a thing that is going to happen. The Lord listens to the whole account. When Jojen is finished, the Lord asks if there is more. Jojen says there is not. From this dream the Lord says good night. Jojen goes to his room. The Lord of Greywater Watch sits alone in the hall for a long time. He has been carrying a question for 10 years, and now the question has sharpened into something he cannot keep in the back of his mind any longer. Jon is 11 years old. He knows his mother was Lyanna Stark. He knows his father was a great lord, now dead. He does not know his father's name. The Lord could tell him. He has been one honest sentence away from telling him for 4 years. He decides to wait. The world he knows from what the traders bring through the causeway is less settled than it was in the early years of Robert's reign. The South is a place of rumors and court intrigues and alliances made and broken in the dark. A boy with the right bloodline, told who he is too early, with no understanding of the world that would want to use him, is a danger to himself. He decides, not yet. Jon is not ready. The neck is still the right place. He closes the fire and goes to bed, and the castle drifts on the water beneath him. Several months later, a river trader coming up the causeway road from the south brings news that has been traveling by mouth through every inn and ferry crossing between King's Landing and the Neck. The former hand of the king is dead, the man who ran the realm's affairs while Robert Baratheon hunted and feasted and held tournaments. A new hand has been named, Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North. The king has summoned him south to King's Landing. The Lord of Greywater Watch hears this news at the Causeway Way station and stands very still in the cold air for a moment before walking back toward the bog paths. The rider who carries coded messages from the north to Greywater Watch is a man who trusts Ned Stark and knows the paths because Ned Stark showed them to him. If Ned Stark is in King's Landing, a city at the other end of the realm, there is no one to send the rider, and there is nothing to send. The thread between the only 2 people alive who know Jon's full parentage is about to stretch the length of Westeros. That night, Jojen wakes from a dream and sits up in his bed. He does not make a sound. In the morning he tells Mira, in the plain, factual way he tells things. I saw a man without a head 3 times in the same dream. I did not recognize the man's face, but I will know it when I see it. Jon is quiet for the rest of the day. In the particular way he is quiet when something he does not fully understand is sitting behind his eyes and he is deciding what to do with it. Neither of them says anything to the Lord of Greywater Watch. He already knows about Jojen's dreams. He already knows that Jojen's dreams are never wrong. The rider does not come. He is supposed to come at the turning of each season, or when there is something worth saying, by way of the outer neck causeway, to a Cranagman go-between, who knows the path to the rendezvous point, who passes the message to a second runner, who carries it to the castle. This system has worked for 12 years. It worked when the message said, hold fast, and when it said the cover holds, and when it said there is nothing to report, which is the best kind of message. The Lord of Greywater Watch has read those messages in the great hall of his moving castle, and burned them, and absorbed what they told him, and the system has held, because the man at the other end of it was where the man was supposed to be. Ned Stark is in King's Landing now. He is the hand of the king. He is in a city at the other end of the realm, surrounded by people who cannot know what he knows, and the man he trusted to carry his messages north does not know where to send them or whether there is anything to send. The rendezvous point goes empty once, and then again, and then a third time. The Lord of Greywater Watch does not let his face change. He burns the habit of expecting a message the way he has burned every other piece of information that outlived its usefulness, completely, without ceremony, without sentiment. He begins doing what he has always done when a situation changes in a way that cannot be changed back, which is to adjust to the new shape of things and prepare for what comes next. What comes next, he suspects, will not be simple. Jon is 12 years old. He knows that the messages have stopped. He does not know precisely what this means. The Lord of Greywater Watch does not explain it to him in full, because Jon at 12 does not yet have all the pieces required to understand the full implication, and a partial explanation of a complicated thing is sometimes worse than no explanation at all. Jon trains. It is the one thing he can do that is fully within his own control, so he does it with the focused attention he gives to everything that matters to him. Frog spear in the mornings. Net work in the afternoons, because Mira has always been ahead of him there, and he intends to close the gap. He runs the bog paths in the early dark before the castle has properly woken up, reading the ground by feel and memory in the places where there is not yet enough light to read it by eye. In 296 AC, when Jon is 13, a Lannister outrider enters the eastern approaches to the Neck. He is one of the small scouts that the Southern Lords sometimes send up the King's Road to gather information about northern movements and the state of the passes. This one has come farther than most. He has left the hard-packed King's Road and moved east into the soft edges of the Neck's approaches, perhaps following a rumor about a road that cuts through, or perhaps simply following his own confidence, which has carried him past every warning sign that the Neck posts for people who know how to read them. The Cranogman do not stop him at the outer edge. They let him come in. Jon and Mira are two of the 4-person patrol that takes up behind him, shadowing him through the eastern approaches for 2 days while he makes his way deeper into terrain that grows steadily. Less navigable and more hostile. The outrider is a capable man on a capable horse, and for the first half-day he rides with the confidence of someone who expects the ground to continue to cooperate. By the second half-day, he has a different expression. The path has branched 4 times, and each branch has led him into ground that his horse cannot cross. He has backtracked 3 times. He has been alone in the fog of the Neck's eastern shallows for long enough to understand that he does not know where he is. Jon watches him from the reeds with the patience of someone who has been reading this bog for 6 years and knows exactly what the outrider is about to discover. The outrider discovers that the Neck does not end in the direction he is heading. He turns south on the second afternoon, and he takes a different path home than the one he came in on, and he arrives back at the King's Road with no information and a healthy new respect for the eastern marshes. He never saw a Cranogman. He never saw 2 young people from the castle who knew every bend in every path he walked. Jon comes home from this feeling something he has not felt before, not quite pride. Something quieter and more certain than pride. Something that has to do with knowing what you can do and having done it. He does not have a word for it. He thinks the Cranogmen probably do not either. He thinks it might just be what competence feels like when it gets used. Dugen's green dreams are getting worse. Not worse in the sense of more frightening, though they are often that. Worse in the sense of more frequent and more consuming. He spends more time sleeping than waking during some stretches, and the spells of trembling that accompany the deeper dreams last longer than they used to. He comes out of them thinner, with a hollow look behind his eyes that takes a few hours to fill back in. He is 10, 11 years old. He should look like a child. He looks like someone doing a very demanding kind of work. He tells Jon with the directness that is Jojen's most consistent quality. In my dreams, you are not a Cranogman. You are something else. Something the South doesn't have a word for yet. John asks what word Jojen would use. Jojen is quiet for a moment. He says, "Dragon." But you don't know what that means yet, and I don't know how to teach you what it means. I only know that the dream is about you, and the word in the dream is that one. He pauses. I am telling you what I see. What you do with it is your own matter. John sits with the word for a long time. He does not tell the Lord of Greywater Watch about this conversation. He suspects the Lord already knows, or something close enough to knowing that the conversation would not surprise him. He is beginning to understand that there is a great deal the Lord of Greywater Watch already knows. In his 15th year, John is the best fighter at Greywater Watch. He does not say this. He does not need to. The crannogmen train against him in the yard, and they know it the way they know the depth of a path by the feel of the ground. He is taller than any of them, taller than the Lord of Greywater Watch by most of a head, and he has turned that height into a weapon with the same patient thoroughness he applied to everything else. He is steady where the crannogmen are quick, still where they are loose, and the combination in the training yard produces results that have stopped being surprising and started just being what John does. The only person at Greywater Watch he cannot outfight is the Lord of Greywater Watch. He is still working on this. He suspects it will take longer than he would like. He asks the Lord for the rest of the truth about his father. The Lord says, "Not yet." John says very quietly, "You have said not yet for 6 years. The Lord of Greywater Watch looks at him. It is the kind of look that carries a weight that the man giving it has decided, after consideration, not to put into words. John has spent enough time with him to know that there is something in this particular silence that is not refusal. It is not dismissal. It is something older and heavier than that, and it has nothing to do with whether John has earned the answer. John does not know what it has to do with. The Lord says nothing. John nods once and goes back to training. The news comes in 298 AC, carried by a trader working the causeway road north from the Riverlands, who has been repeating the same story at every ferry and inn and way station between the Trident and Moat Cailin. Ned Stark, Hand of the King, has been arrested for treason. He is in the black cells beneath the Red Keep. The reasons depend on which version of the story you hear at which particular inn. The Lord of Greywater Watch hears this at the Causeway Post and absorbs it the way he absorbs all news from the south, in silence. And then he walks back along the bog path to the castle with the information sitting inside him like a stone dropped into still water. Jojen has a dream that night. He goes into it badly, thrashing more than usual, and he does not come out of it until nearly midday. When he comes out, he does not speak, and he does not leave his room for 3 days. He will not say what he saw in the dream. Mira sits outside his door with her back against the reed-woven wall and her net in her hands, and does not go anywhere. John stands in the bog outside the castle walls. He is very still for a very long time. The trader's story is still moving up the Causeway Road, carried mouth to every person between here and the wall. The man who held John's secret for 12 years is in a dungeon at the other end of the world, and the Lord of Greywater Watch is the only person still standing on the side of the secret, and the castle is moving on the water as it always moves, and the reeds are whispering against each other in the early evening wind. And John stands in the mud with his frog spear in one hand and the word dragon somewhere behind his grey eyes, and he is very, very still. 3 weeks after it happens, the news reaches Greywater Watch. It comes the way all news comes to the castle, by mouth, carried from inn to ferry to causeway, way station to crannogman runner to the Lord of Greywater Watch's hand, already worn thin by the number of people who have repeated it. 3 weeks, travelling at horse speed from King's Landing to the nearest road town, then by foot and boat through the bog paths, the event itself is already old by the time it arrives. The world has already moved on to whatever comes next, the way the world always moves on while the neck is still receiving word of what the world has done. Ned Stark is dead. He was beheaded on the steps of the great sept of Baelor in King's Landing, on the order of the new boy king, by a man named Elyn Payne, who serves as the royal executioner. The blade used was Ned Stark's own greatsword, a Valyrian steel sword named Ice. He was condemned for treason. Everyone in the Seven Kingdoms knows this by now, or will know it before the moon turns. The man who held Jon's secret, one of the only two people alive on Earth who knew all of it, is dead in his room the night before Jojen had woken from a dream shaking. He had not said what he saw. He had not needed to. The Lord of Greywater Watch reads the account at the causeway post and stands in the cold air outside and looks at the water for a long time. Then he carries it back to the castle. Jon's response is not grief. This is the first thing that surprises him about himself, and then, on reflection, the first thing that does not surprise him at all. He has known for 3 years that there was a man to the north who knew his name and sent coded messages to keep him safe. He has never seen this man's face. He has never heard this man's voice. He has never walked beside him, or trained under him, or eaten at a table with him. He knows him only as a series of brief messages that said hold fast and the cover holds and nothing more, a name attached to a distance, a person who existed at the other end of a thread so thin it sometimes felt like Jon had imagined it. You cannot grieve a man you have never known. You can be angry that the world killed him. Jon picks up his frog spear from beside the door. He does not say anything to anyone. He walks out of the great hall and across the yard and down to the plank bridge. He is going south. He has no horse and no coin and no knowledge of the roads south of Moat Cailin, and he knows all of this, and none of it is changing the direction his feet want to go. A man he was told was honorable, in a world he was told he must stay away from, has been killed by a boy king on the steps of a temple, and Jon is 15 years old with a frog spear and 15 years of rage that has never had a proper target, and he is going to go south and find one. Mira hits him in the shoulder with both hands before he reaches the bridge. She does not call his name first. She does not ask where he thinks he is going. She simply comes off the wall where she has been watching him and drives him sideways into the bog bank beside the path with the full weight of her body, the way she drives a net into the water when the timing is right, and she plants herself between him and the bridge. She says, "You do not know who gave the order." She says, "You do not know the roads." She says, "You are 15 years old, and you are carrying a frog spear and a secret that would kill you faster than any sword if anyone in King's Landing heard your name spoken out loud." She says all of this at speed, and without softening any of it, because Mira has always understood that the truth is only useful if you deliver it before the person has stopped listening. Then she says, "You are not ready." Behind her, Jojen's voice comes from the doorway of the great hall, quiet and level in the way that Jojen says things he has already thought about completely. He says, "The world is not ready for you either." Jon stands in the mud at the edge of the bog bank, with Mira in front of him, and Jojen at his back, and the frog spear in his hand, and he looks at the plank bridge, and the water beyond it, and the mist on the water, and he stands there for a long time. He does not cross the bridge. He goes back inside and sets the spear beside the door, and sits in the yard in the dark for the rest of the evening, and no one asks him to come in, because Mira and Jojen both know that this is the kind of sitting that a person has to sit through on their own. The Lord of Greywater watches all of this from a window. When John has been sitting long enough, he goes down, he sits in the great hall for a time, and does the arithmetic of the new situation. He is now the only living person who knows the full truth of what happened at the Tower of Joy in 283 AC. Ned Stark is dead. The other half of the secret is a 15-year-old boy sitting in the yard with a frog spear beside the door, furious at a world he has been kept away from, with half a truth and no map for what to do with it. The half-truth is not going to hold anymore. This is what the Lord of Greywater decides, sitting in his hall while the castle moves around him. Not because the world is demanding the full truth, because a boy who knows only part of who he is will make decisions based on the part he knows, and the part John knows right now is that he is the hidden son of a dead Stark woman, and that the man who kept him hidden has been beheaded in the capital. With that set of facts and no more, the only decision a 15-year-old makes is to go south and do something useless. John needs more of the picture. Not all of it, not yet, but more. The Lord of Greywater goes to the yard. He says, "Get in the boat." They take the small reed boat out to the still part of the bog, the stretch of water to the east, where the reeds close overhead, and the sound of the castle does not follow. The Lord ships the paddle and lets the boat sit in the current, and says nothing for a time, and John says nothing, and the water moves beneath them. Then the Lord says, "Your mother was Lyanna Stark." John goes very still. The Lord says, "She was the sister of Ned Stark, the man whose name you heard today for the last time. He never told you his name, because you were not supposed to know his name." That was the arrangement. He held his piece of the secret in the north, and I held mine in the neck, and neither piece was complete without the other. He is dead now, and I am the one left, and there are things you need to know. He says your mother died the day you were born. She was in a tower in the mountains of Dawn, in childbirth, and the blood of your birth was more than she could survive. She died in that tower, with Ned Stark holding her hand, and before she died, she made 2 men promise to keep you safe. One of those men is dead now. The other is in this boat. He says, she asked 2 things of us, that we keep you safe, and that we keep you secret. Ned Stark spent 15 years paying in reputation for the second one. He let people believe things about him that were not true, because the truth would have led anyone who heard it straight to you. He paid that cost every day for 15 years without ever meeting you. John says nothing for a long time. He is looking at the water beneath the boat, where the dark of the bog path shows through and the reeds trail their fingers in the slow current. He is 15 years old, and he has a dead mother he never knew, and a dead man who died protecting him, and a father who is still a silence in the shape of a person. He asks only one thing. He says, "What was she like?" The Lord of Greywater looks at him and says, "She chose what she chose, and she loved what she loved, and she did not apologize for either, and the people who knew her best say the world was smaller after she left it." He picks up the second paddle. They row back to the castle in the dark, and the only sound is the water and the reeds. And John does not ask about his father's name. He will, but not tonight. The war comes to the neck the way everything comes to the neck, by mouth, weeks late, carried by a river trader who heard it at a causeway inn from a man who heard it from a rider coming north from the riverlands. The trader's account takes an hour to deliver in full, because there is too much in it for a short telling. Robert Baratheon is dead, gored by a boar on a hunt, the story says. And there are other stories underneath that story that the trader repeats, with the lowered voice of a man reporting something everyone suspects and no one can prove. The old king died and a boy sits the Iron Throne in his place. Joffrey, the queen's son, crowned in King's Landing with the Lannister banners flying. Ned Stark died on the Great Sept steps as a traitor. And from the north, as though the north has been waiting for exactly this moment to answer, Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell, has been declared king in the north by his lords, and then king of the Trident by the river lords who crossed to him. And the northern host is marching south with the new king at its head to cross the neck and carry the war into the Riverlands. The Lord of Greywater Watch hears all of this at the Causeway Post and is quiet for a long time. Jon, standing at his shoulder, hears it too. He hears the name Robb Stark, a boy born the same year as Jon within the same season, a person he has never met and never will meet, but who is, by every measure the outside world uses, the closest thing Jon has to a peer in age and blood, and he hears that this boy is marching south at 16 years old at the head of an army, and something in Jon's chest tightens in a way that he cannot entirely account for and does not try to examine just yet. Robert Baratheon is dead. Jon absorbs this as a separate fact and holds it apart from everything else the trader has said. Robert Baratheon, who would have killed him for the blood that runs in his veins. Robert Baratheon, for whom the castle has moved for 15 years, for whom no raven was ever allowed to carry anything, for whom the whole architecture of Jon's hidden life was built. The man, he died in 298 AC on a hunting trip by a boar's tusk, and a boy who does not know Jon exists sits the throne now, and the secret that has kept Jon in the neck for 15 years is not yet safe. Jon thinks about this on the walk back to the castle. He does not say it out loud. There is no version of this thought that would sound right if he said it out loud. Within the week, the Lord of Greywater Watch is preparing to ride. He is a northern lord. The neck is the gate the northern host must pass through to cross into the Riverlands, and the Lord of Greywater Watch holds the neck. And when the king in the north calls his banners, the Lord of Greywater Watch answers because that is what it means to be a Lord of the North. He assembles the Cranogmen who will ride with him, and he makes the arrangements that need to be made, and he calls Jon to him the night before he leaves. He says, "You will not come with me." He says it before Jon can say that he wants to. Jon does not argue. He already knows that someone has to stay with the castle, and that the Cranogmen who remain will need a center, and that he is the center the Lord of Greywater Watch has decided to leave behind. He is 15 years old, and the Lord of Greywater Watch is placing the castle and everything in it under his judgment, and this is either an extraordinary trust or a necessary calculation or both at once. And Jon accepts it without complaint, because the Cranogmen are watching him from across the yard, and he has learned enough about how the neck works to know that how he receives this matters. He asks only one thing. He says, "Will you tell me the rest of it when you come back?" Meaning his father's name. Meaning the half-truth that has been sitting in him since the reed boat conversation, the piece that the Lord has been withholding for 6 years, and has still not given. The Lord looks at him and says, "If we both live." Then he turns and walks to his horse. Jon watches him go. He counts that as a yes. For the next several months, the castle is quieter than it has ever been, and Jon runs it the way the Lord of Greywater Watch would run it, which is to say quietly, with attention to everything and visibility about very little. The Cranogmen follow him without ceremony. They have watched him in these bogs for 15 years. They know what he can do. The Lannister probing force arrives in 299 AC. It is a column of roughly 200 men moving north up the King's Road from the south, while the Northern Army's attention is committed to the fighting in the Riverlands. The column's purpose is to test the neck's defenses, to gather intelligence to find out whether the gate the northern host used to march south is now unguarded or thin enough to push through. It is a sensible military calculation. It is based on the assumption that the neck is merely difficult ground. The neck is not merely difficult ground. The neck is the ground that was designed to kill this kind of calculation. Jon organizes the response the way the Lord of Greywater Watch would organize it. He does not mass the Cranogmen at any single point. He spreads them along the column's likely approach in the reeds and the water, invisible from the road, positioned at the angles that the terrain makes available, and that the column's scouts will not be looking for, because they do not know how the neck fights. The scouts come down first, and they see nothing because there is nothing to see, and they report the road is clear, and the column advances. The darts come from the reeds on the second day. These are not training darts. The Lord of Greywater Watch explained the difference to Jon at age 8, and the Cranogmen do not need the explanation because they have always known it. The real darts are coated, and a graze is enough, and a soldier who takes a graze does not continue fighting, because the poison does not care how large the wound is. 3 men fall on the second day's march, without anyone on the road seeing where the shots came from. The column halts. Scouts are sent into the reeds. The reeds are empty by the time the scouts reach them, because Cranogmen in the neck do not wait to be found. Mira works the waterline. She has her nets across the shallower channels, the places where men who leave the road to flush the shooters have to cross, and the men who enter the water find the nets before they find Cranogmen. She works with 2 others. They are fast, and they are quiet, and they are never in the same position twice. And by the end of the second day, the column's officers understand that they cannot leave the road, which means they cannot clear the reeds, which means the reeds will keep killing them for as long as they advance. They do not stop advancing. They are soldiers, and they have their orders, and they press north for 3 days, while the darts come from the reeds, and the nets come from the water, and the column's numbers diminish 1 graze at a time. On the 3rd day, Jon is standing in the reeds at the eastern flank, when something in him goes still and goes elsewhere. He is looking at the road from 30 feet above it. He is a marsh hawk. He has a marsh hawk's eyes, which see differently than human eyes, and what those eyes show him is the eastern approach around the column's rear, a flanking party of 20 men who have found a path through the outer shallows, trying to come around behind the Cranogmen's positions from an angle that the ground should have prevented, and that someone in the column's command has been patient enough to find. His own patrol is in their path. They do not know the flanking party is coming. Jon comes back to his body. He does not waste time on the transition. He moves immediately, signaling the 2 Cranogmen nearest to him with the hand sign that means relocate and the direction that means north, and he takes his own new position before the flanking party rounds the last bend in the path. The flanking party arrives where the Cranogmen were and finds empty reeds and quiet water. They spend 20 minutes searching before the column calls them back. The column turns south on the 4th day. Not a single Lannister soldier reaches Moat Cailin. The neck holds as it has always held, as it will hold, as long as Cranogmen stand in it. The bodies the column leaves behind in the bog are absorbed by the bog, quietly and without drama, the way the neck absorbs everything it takes. Jon is sitting in the mud at the edge of the water when Jojen comes and sits beside him. Jojen did not fight. Jojen has never fought. He sat in the castle during the 3 days of the ambush, and he came out when it was over, and now he sits in the mud next to Jon, the way he sits everywhere, with complete physical stillness, and a great deal of interior movement. He says, "I dreamed of you on a black dragon, not for pleasure, not to see the country from a height. You were riding it because you had to, because something required it of you." He says it, the way he says all his dream things, as a statement about the future. Not a wish, not a fear. A thing that is going to happen. Jon looks at the bog in front of him for a long time. The water is very still. He says, "I am a Cranagman who can walk in a marshhawk's eyes. I have never been on a horse. I have no dragon." Jojen says, "Not yet." Jon does not answer that. He gets up and goes back to the castle, and the mud makes no sound when he lifts his boots out of it, and the marshhawk is somewhere above the bog, riding the cold air, and neither of them says anything more. The Lord of Greywater Watch comes back from the south in the late autumn of 300 AC, and he comes back alone. Not entirely alone. He has the Crannog men who rode with him, most of them, the ones he pulled out of the Riverlands before the trap closed. But the northern host he rode to join is not behind him, because the northern host no longer exists in any meaningful sense. And Robb Stark, king in the north and king of the Trident, is dead. Jon learns the shape of it in pieces over the first 2 days, from the Lord directly and from the Cranagmen who came back with him, who carry the account in broken, reluctant fragments, the way soldiers carry the memory of something that went badly and suddenly. The Red Wedding is what people are calling it. Robb Stark was 17 years old, born the same year as Jon, a king who had won every battle he had ever fought, and he was murdered at a feast. The feast was held at the Twins, the castle of a lord named Walder Frey, under guest right, which is the oldest law in the realm, that a host does not harm a guest who has eaten his bread and salt. The Freys violated it. They violated it with planning and preparation, with musicians who had crossbows underneath their instruments, and with gates that were closed before the feast ended. Robb Stark died there. His mother died there. The army he had built died there. The orchestration behind it, the Lord of Greywater Watch tells Jon quietly, came from Tywin Lannister, who is 58 years old and has been the most calculating lord in the Seven Kingdoms for longer than Jon has been alive. And from a treacherous northern lord who delivered his own king to his enemies under the same roof where the king was supposed to be safe, the Lord of Greywater Watch withdrew his men before the wedding. He is one of the few northern lords who came home with the same number of men he left with. He says this without satisfaction. Jon absorbs all of it. He sits in the yard of the castle the second evening, and he thinks about Robb Stark, who he never met, who grew up in Winterfell while Jon grew up in the Neck, and who rode to war at 16 and died at a feast at 17. And who was everything the outside world would have called Jon's cousin, without knowing that the word cousin did not come close to covering the actual distance between what Robb was and what Jon is. He thinks about the treachery of the thing. He thinks about guest right violated in a feasting hall, and what that says about the world south of the Neck. He thinks about it for a long time. On the third day, the Lord of Greywater Watch tells him to come inside. They sit in the great hall of Greywater Watch, not on the reed boat this time, not in the still part of the bog where no one can overhear. In the hall, with the fire low, and the castle rocking gently on its crannog, and the sounds of the marsh coming through the reed-woven walls on all sides, the Lord sits across from Jon the way he has sat across from him for 17 years of lessons and training and difficult conversations, and he says, "I told you your mother was Lyanna Stark. I told you your father was a great lord who is dead. Here is the rest of it." Jon is very still. The Lord says, "Your father was Rhaegar Targaryen. He was the prince of the Iron Throne, the son of the Mad King Aerys, the man who was heir to everything the Targaryens had built before Robert Baratheon ended it. He was not what his father was. He loved your mother. She loved him. What happened between them was not a kidnapping, whatever the histories will tell you. They loved each other in the way that people love each other when they have decided the world's rules do not apply to what they feel, and they were probably right, and it cost nearly everyone they knew their lives, and none of that changes the fact of it. He says they were married, in secret in Dorne, before a heart tree, with a septon named Maynard as the only witness to the ceremony. Rhaegar had been married before, to a Dornish princess, and he annulled that marriage to make Lyanna Stark his lawful wife. He did not do this carelessly. He believed he was doing something that mattered for reasons larger than love, though the love was real. He believed there was a prophecy and that his children were part of it. He believed all of this, and then he died at the Battle of the Trident, with Robert Baratheon's warhammer in his chest, before he ever held you or knew you had been born. He says, "You are Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, who were lawfully wed before the gods. You are not a bastard. By every law of the realm and every tradition of succession the Seven Kingdoms has ever held, you were born with the strongest claim to the Iron Throne that exists in the world." The marsh sounds fill the silence after this. The fire is low. Outside, something moves through the reeds along the waterline. Jon says nothing for a long time. He is 17 years old. He has never been south of Moat Cailin. He has never seen a city, never spoken to a lord of the realm, never attended a feast or a tournament or a court. He has never ridden a horse. He knows how to kill a man with a frog spear and how to set a net across a bog channel at night, and which shade of black-green water will swallow him whole if he steps in it. He has walked in the eyes of a marsh hawk and felt the cold of the eastern shallows through a bog lizard's scales. He knows the neck. He knows the people who live in it, and the weapons they make, and the way they read the ground that everyone else reads as impassable. He does not know what to do with being Aegon Targaryen. He asks, after a long time, not because he doubts the Lord of Greywater Watch, who has never told him a false thing in 17 years, because he is a practical person, and a name without evidence is a claim, and a claim without evidence is a weapon that cuts the person holding it as often as it cuts anyone else. The Lord says there is a journal. The Septon, who witnessed the wedding, kept a record of it, the way Septons keep records of all the ceremonies they perform. His name was Maynard. His journal is in the archives of the Citadel at Oldtown, among thousands of other journals that Septons have deposited there across the centuries. It is not marked in any way that would tell a casual reader what it contains. A man who knew what he was looking for and knew where to look could find it. Jon nods. He sits with this for a while longer, and then he gets up and goes out to the reeds. He finds Mira where she usually is in the evenings, at the outer wall where the reeds grow tallest, with her nets piled beside her and her hands busy with a knot she has been working on for a week. He sits down next to her and tells her all of it. He tells it plainly, without ceremony, the way the Lord told it to him, because there is no version of this story that benefits from decoration. He tells her about Rhaegar Targaryen and the heart tree in Dorne and Septon Maynard and the annulment and the name Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name. He tells her the whole thing. Mira listens to all of it without interrupting. When he has finished, she is quiet for a long time, in the way the neck teaches people to be quiet, which is a quiet that is actually full of thought, and is not the same thing as having nothing to say. Then she says, "You're still, Jon." She says it the way she says things when she has decided on them, plainly, without softening, without apology. She does not say it to make him feel better. She says it because it is true, and she has been saying true things to John since she was 4 years old, and she sees no reason to stop. He is still the person who sat in a reed canoe at age 1 and grabbed both sides and looked at the water without flinching. He is still the person who got up every time the bog took him down and tried the next path. He is still the person who walked in a marsh hawk's eyes and moved 3 positions before the flanking move happened. A name from a Septon's journal in a city neither of them has ever seen does not change any of that. John looks at her for a moment and then looks back at the water. He says, "I know." He means it. He just does not know yet how to live inside, both things at once. Jojen has been sick for weeks. The green dreaming has been consuming him in a way it never has before, burning through him from the inside out the way a fire burns a green log, slowly, with a great deal of effort, leaving something diminished behind. His episodes of trembling come harder and last longer. He wakes from them thinner than he went in, with dark circles under his eyes, and a look of having traveled a very long distance, and come back uncertain about whether it was worth the trip. He is 14 years old. He should not look like this at 14. John goes to his room when Jojen is in one of his clearer periods. He sits on the edge of Jojen's bed, and Jojen looks at him with the brown-eyed, distant attention that Jojen has always given to things he has already seen from a different angle in his sleep. Jojen says, "I have been dreaming of the north, not the neck, further north than that." He pauses. He seems to be choosing his words with care, which is unusual for Jojen, who does not normally need to choose. He says, "Something dead and vast and old is moving south. I have been seeing it for 2 years. In the last months it has been moving faster. I do not know what it is exactly. I know what it feels like. It feels like winter that never becomes spring. It feels like a cold that is also a hunger." He stops and gathers himself and then says, "The dragon needs to wake before the cold reaches the walls of men. I have seen this clearly. I do not know exactly what it means, but I know it is true." He closes his eyes after saying this, the way he closes his eyes when he has spent everything he has on a given piece of waking. John sits beside him for a while in the quiet room, with the castle moving under them on the water and the marsh sounds coming through the walls, and he thinks about a Septon's journal in Old Town, and a name that belongs to a prince who died at a river crossing before John was born. He does not have answers to any of it. He has a frog spear and a marsh hawk's memories, and 17 years of the neck in him, and somewhere in Old Town there is a book that says his name. He sits with Jojen until Jojen is asleep. Then he goes out and looks at the stars above the bog, which are the same stars they have always been, cold and indifferent and very far away. The argument between John and the Lord of Greywater Watch has been going on, in one form or another, since the night of the full truth. It sharpens in the months after the Lord's return, the way an argument sharpens when both sides have finally said all the obvious things and arrived at the part where the real disagreement lives. The Lord says if you stay here, you are safe. You are also useless. Every year you stay, the world outside changes. Kings die, wars end, new powers fill the spaces. The old ones leave. None of it reaches you. None of it is shaped by you. You are a man with the most consequential bloodline in the 7 kingdoms, sitting in a swamp where no one can find him, doing nothing with any of it. John says, "If I go, and if my name reaches the wrong ears, I am dead before I can do anything with any of it either." The Lord says, "I did not say the choice was easy. They go back and forth like this for weeks. Jon is 17, and the Lord of Greywater Watch has been keeping this secret for 17 years, and neither of them is wrong, which is the problem with the argument and the reason it keeps returning. The world that Jon would walk into is not the world it was when the Lord brought a newborn into the neck. Robert Baratheon is dead these 2 years, which removes the most immediate and personal danger. Robert knew the Targaryen line and hated it with the specific hatred of a man who lost something he loved to it, and he would have killed a Targaryen child without a second thought. Robert's son Joffrey sits the throne now, a boy who has never heard the name Aegon Targaryen and has no reason to think one exists. The threat has changed shape. It is not a king's personal hatred anymore. It is the more diffuse and in some ways more dangerous threat of politics. The Southron lords who might find Jon's claim useful as a lever to move other lords, who might use his name as a banner or a bargaining piece, regardless of what Jon himself wants, who might expose him not to destroy him, but to use him. These threats are real, and the Lord of Greywater Watch names them plainly. Jon listens to all of them, and he does not dismiss them, because he is not a reckless person. He is a person who has been thinking about this since the reed boat conversation 2 years ago, and has been waiting for enough of the picture to be in place before deciding what the picture means. He is not yet certain. In the meantime, he trains differently. He keeps the Crannogmen's weapons and the Crannogmen's methods, because these are part of him in a way that nothing else is built into his hands and his instincts after 10 years of daily practice. But he adds to them the Lord of Greywater Watch knows the forms that Southron knights use. He has fought them and watched them, and has in his head a thorough account of what they do and what they do not do, and he teaches Jon. Not because Jon will ever be a Southron knight, because Jon may one day fight beside Southron knights, or against them, and a Crannogman who can read Southron combat patterns the way he reads the mud is more dangerous than either one alone. Mira is his sparring partner. She has always been his sparring partner. She is faster than he is and has been his whole life, and she uses this as a tool. She pushes him into the transitions, the moments between a Crannogman's movement and a Southron form's movement, where the two styles are most awkward about becoming each other. And she finds these gaps and exploits them with the focused efficiency of someone who has been sparring with Jon for 13 years and knows exactly where he is not yet complete. She pushes him harder than he pushes himself. She always has. The news of the dead comes in the way. All news comes to Greywater Watch, through a chain of ears, each link a little further from the original than the last. A Crannogman working the northern bog paths encounters a wildling coming south from above the wall. The wildling is alone, and he is not stopping. He is not looking for shelter or trade or company. He is moving south, as fast as a man can move on foot, through the neck's outer causeways, and the only thing he wants is to keep moving. The Crannogman speaks enough of the free folk's tongue to understand the broad shape of what the wildling says, and what he says is this: the dead are walking north of the wall, men who died in the cold and did not stay dead. Men who stand up with blue in their eyes where there should be nothing, and who do not fall from arrows or blades the way living men fall. He says they are moving south. He says they have been moving south for years, and they are not slowing down. The Crannogman passes this account to another Crannogman, who passes it to a runner, who mentions it to a trader at the Causeway Inn, who carries it to the next stop along the road. And 3 weeks after the wildling walked past, a version of the story reaches Jon through the same mouth-to-ear chain. He stands in the yard and holds the account in his mind, next to Jojen's "Something dead and vast and old, and the way Jojen's last dream had him riding toward the north on a black dragon, not for pleasure, but because something required it. He has been thinking about north for a long time. Jojen's last words to Jon come the morning before his death. He has been failing by degrees for weeks, the green dreaming burning through him the way it has been burning for months, with the episodes coming closer together and each one leaving him thinner and farther away. He surfaces to full wakefulness in the early morning, which is unusual. Lately his clear periods have come in the afternoon, brief and effortful. Jon is there because he has been taking the morning shift sitting with Jojen since Meera took the nights. Jojen opens his eyes, and they are clear, clearer than they have been in some time. He looks at Jon and says, "I have seen enough." He says it the way he says all things that have come to him from the dreaming, as a completed thought, not a complaint. Then he says, "You know what you need to know. The rest is for you to do." He closes his eyes again. He does not seem frightened. He seems finished, the way a person seems finished when they have come to the end of the thing they came to do, and they are ready to be done. The next morning, he does not wake. He is breathing, and his eyes are open, and they are looking at something that is not in the room, not in the castle, not in the neck. Whatever he sees from that far away, he sees it without distress and without struggle. By evening, the breathing stops. He dies in the castle that has been his whole world, with the Lord of Greywater Watch sitting on his right and Meera on his left and Jon at the foot of the bed. The castle moves on the water the way it has always moved. Outside, the bog is dark and quiet and completely itself. Jojen Reed is 15 years old. The Lord of Greywater Watch makes the arrangements. Meera does not leave the room for a long time. Jon goes out. He walks into the bogs alone past the patrol lines and the named paths and the 5-mile radius of ground. He knows better than he knows anything, out into the outer edges where the reeds grow so thick they block the sky and the water is completely still. He sits down in the mud. The water comes to the tops of his boots. He sets down the frog spear, he sets down the knife, he lays them in the reeds next to him, and then he sits very still and he lets everything go. The castle, the secret, his mother who died in a tower in Dawn, his father who died at a river crossing before Jon was born, the journal in a citadel archive in Old Town, Robb Stark dead in a feasting hall at 17. Ned Stark dead on a temple's steps, the boy king on the Iron Throne who does not know Jon exists, the dead walking south from somewhere beyond the wall. He lets all of it go the way you let go of a rope, not forever, just for now, because holding everything at once is not possible, and he needs his hands free for what comes next. He reaches. The grey marsh wolf is in the northern bogs, as it has been for 8 years, ranging the same territory. Older now, the muzzle lighter and the pace slower than it was when a 10-year-old Jon first looked at the world through its eyes on a patrol path in 293 AC. Jon finds it the way he always finds it, by going quiet inside and reaching in the direction he has always known the wolf to be, and feeling the wolf's awareness come up to meet him like a tide. He spends the full day in the wolf's skin. He is not a boy in this time. He is not Aegon Targaryen, and he is not Jon Snow, and he is not a Cranogman, and he is not the hidden heir to a throne he has never seen. He is a wolf in a bog in the far north of the world, moving through the reeds and the shallow water with the wolf's certainty, smelling the cold air and the dark water and the distant hint of something moving far to the north. The wolf has been smelling it for months on the wind that comes from above the wall. It does not smell like anything that belongs to the world the wolf has always known. When the sun is low and the bog is going dark, John comes back to his own body. He is sitting in the mud with the water at his boot tops, and the frog spear, and the knife in the reeds beside him, and the sky going from grey to black above the reeds. He sits there for a while. Something in him has settled, the way water settles after you have thrown a stone in it, not into its original state, but into a new stillness that knows the stone went through it. He picks up the frog spear, he picks up the knife, he walks back to the castle. Mira is at the outer wall when he comes in. She looks at him for a moment. He does not look like the same person who walked out this morning. She is not sure she can say exactly what is different. Something behind his grey eyes has made a decision. He says, "I need to go north." She says, "I know." Neither of them says anything else for a while. They stand at the wall of the castle that has been their whole world, and they look at the dark water, and the marsh sounds fill the quiet between them, and the castle moves slowly on its crannog, as it has always moved, carrying what it carries. The Lord of Greywater Watch does not try to stop them. He has known this was coming since before Jojen died. The dreamer told him, in one of the last clear conversations they had, that this departure was in the picture he had been carrying for years. He said it the way Jojen said everything, as information, not as instruction. The Lord stored it with everything else Jojen had ever told him, and he has been preparing for it since. He calls John to him the morning they are to leave, and he gives him two things. The first is a folded square of parchment covered in the Lord of Greywater Watch's own careful hand. John unfolds it at the Lord's instruction and reads, "It is an account of the Tower of Joy." Written in the same plain, careful way, the Lord approaches everything. The date and the place, the names of the men who died in the yard below, the names of the King's Guard they killed and who killed them, the words Lyanna Stark said in the tower room before she died. The name she said, the marriage she described, in a place in Dawn, before a heart tree with a scepter named Maynard as the only witness, and the name of the archive in Old Town, where Maynard's journal of that ceremony can be found. The Lord of Greywater Watch's own account of what he saw and what he heard from his place in the yard below, before and during and after the fight. It is signed with his name, and it is, if anyone reads it, the most dangerous document in the Seven Kingdoms. The Lord says, if you ever need proof, that is the proof. If you never need it, burn it. If you lose it, I have another copy in the castle, and the citadel has Maynard's journal, and the truth does not depend on any single piece of paper. But carry it. You may find a moment when having it matters more than anything else. John folds it and puts it in the inside of his hide armor, against his chest, where it sits flat and invisible. The second thing the Lord gives him is not an object. He says, "The neck will always be here when you need it. No army from the south will take it while I live. Whatever happens in the world outside, there is a moving castle in the eastern bogs that knows your name, and the people in it will not turn you away, and no one who wishes you harm will ever find it." He says this plainly, without sentiment, as a fact about the world, rather than a comfort, which is why it lands as both. John stands in the yard of the castle that has been his whole world for 18 years. He looks at the Lord of Greywater Watch, who is the man who carried him out of Dawn in a cloak, and raised him in the neck, and told him hard truths at the right times, and kept a secret for 18 years, at costs John is only beginning to understand fully. He does not know what to say that would cover any of this. He says, "I'll come back." The Lord nods once, and does not say anything else. There is nothing else that needs to be said. Mira is already at the gate. They walk north through the bog paths to Moat Cailin, which takes most of a morning. The paths are as familiar as breathing. John moves through them with the automatic ease of someone who has been reading this ground for 15 years, and then they come out on the causeway approach, and the 3 towers of Moat Cailin rise above them. Children's Tower, Gatehouse Tower, Drunkard's Tower, the names passed down through the Cranagmen, the way all the next knowledge is passed down, spoken rather than written, worn smooth by use. They are partially ruined, as they have been for centuries, and there are Cranagmen on the walls who look down at John and Mira as they pass through the gate in the southern face. The Cranagmen do not wave. He looks up at them as he passes through, and they look back, and there is nothing in this exchange that needs a gesture or a word. They know who he is. They know where he is going. They are Cranogmen, which means they have understood for a long time that a thing you cannot keep forever is best released before you have to watch someone take it from you. They watch him go, he goes, the neck closes behind them, the way water closes over a stone, completely without a mark. On the other side of Moat Cailin, going south, the King's Road begins. John has never stood on a King's Road before. He has read about them in the accounts the Lord of Greywater Watch brought back from his campaigns, and he has seen the far edge of the one that runs north from the Riverlands from a distance during patrols. He was not prepared for the feeling of it underfoot, hard-packed earth and gravel, broad enough for wagons to pass each other, unyielding in a way the bog paths never are. It is a road that does not care about the terrain it crosses. It goes where it intends to go, and the land underneath it adjusts. This is so different from the way the neck works, where every path bends to the ground and the ground is always the authority, that John stands at the edge of it for a moment and simply takes in the wrongness of the sensation. The sky is bigger here. He had not expected that. Over the neck, the reeds and the tree cover and the mist close the sky down to a manageable size, a sky that has edges and horizons near enough to read. Out here, the sky goes as far as he can see in every direction, and it is doing nothing but being enormous. He adjusts to it and starts walking. He is dressed as a Cranagman because he is a Cranagman. Hide armor, soft and dark and practical, nothing that catches the eye or announces the wearer. His frog spear is taller than most of the men on the road, and he carries it the way he has carried it since he was 7. Easily, without display. His net is folded at his belt. He has no sword because he has never learned to use one, and the frog spear has never given him a reason to feel the lack. He has dark hair and grey eyes and the calm of a person who has been in dangerous situations, often enough to have stopped using their face to announce it. And this calm on the King's Road could be taken for a simple northern man's slowness. No one on this road knows him. He is taller than almost everyone he passes. He is broader in the shoulder than almost everyone he passes. The frog spear gets looks because it is unusual this far south, but looks are not the same as recognition, and no one who looks at him is looking for a Targaryen, because no one on this road knows a Targaryen exists and looks the way John looks. Jon Snow has dark hair and grey stark eyes, and a Cranogman's bearing and a Cranogman's weapons, and anyone who examines him with political motives is looking for a silver-haired prince from the stories, and that is not what they see. He is invisible in the plainest and best way, because he looks like himself. 3 days south of Moat Cailin, they find what the war left behind. The village is not large. It was not large before the war, either. Probably a handful of houses, a granary, a well, the kind of salmon that grows up along the King's Road, because the road brings trade, and trade brings people who need somewhere to sleep. The granary is a shell of burned timber now. One of the houses has no roof, and the people inside it have hung skins over the rafters to keep the rain out, which works partially. The well has something wrong at the bottom of it that smells wrong at the top, and the people who live here have been carrying water from a stream 1/2 mile east for 3 months. John stands at the edge of the village, and his first instinct is the Crannogman instinct. Read the situation. Determine the threat. Determine whether the situation is yours to enter or someone else's to resolve. In the neck, involvement in a situation you were not called to often made things worse. The neck taught him to be useful where he was planted and careful about planting himself where he was not. He looks at a woman trying to clear blackened timber from what was the granary's doorway with a tool that is too small for the job, doing it with the patient, methodical determination of someone who has been doing it for weeks and will still be doing it weeks from now if no one helps. Mira is already walking toward her. They spend 3 days in the village. John does not give his name. No one asks. What they want is labor, and John has that in quantity, and he works without announcement or expectation of anything in return, which is the Crannogman way of working, completely without display as a contribution to the thing being done, rather than as a statement about the person doing it. By the end of the 3rd day, the granary's doorway is clear, and the timber that can be saved is stacked, and the well has been examined and determined to need a different kind of help than they can give it, and John and Mira move on. John does not look back at the village. He carries the image of it forward instead, files it next to the Red Wedding and Ned Stark's beheading and the Wildling Runner's account of the dead walking north, in the part of his mind where he keeps the evidence about what the world outside the neck does when there is no one in it making the hard choices. On the 4th day south of Moat Cailin, John reaches for a marshhawk. He does it without thinking about it, the way he has reached for marshhawks 100 times in the neck when he wanted a view the ground could not give him. He reaches in the direction the marshhawks are, in the neck, which is above the reed beds and the bog channels. There are no marshhawks here. The sky above the King's Road is a different sky with different things in it, and the range he is used to reaching across finds nothing he recognizes. He reaches further, he casts wider. He finds something large and warm and rhythmic. A horse grazing in a field 50 yards from the road, belonging to a farmer who is working the far end of the field and paying no attention to anything closer. The horse's mind is vast and simple and deeply calm, like standing in a slow river. John looks at the King's Road through the horse's eyes, which see the world in a way that is not quite the hawk, and not quite the bog lizard, and not quite anything he has entered before. Broad, calm, reading motion rather than detail, aware of the whole field of view rather than any single point in it. He is in the horse for the better part of the morning. When he comes back, Mira is standing beside him on the road with an expression that is 1 part exasperation and 2 parts the affection that has been underneath everything she says to him for 14 years. She says, "You cannot do that when people are watching." He says, "Nobody was watching." She says, "I was watching." He considers this. He says, "You don't count." She says that is not the point. He says that he knows, and he starts walking again, and after a moment she falls in beside him, and the King's Road goes south in front of them, hard and direct, and enormous under that vast open sky. The 2 rangers come from the north, riding south on horses that look like they have been ridden too hard for too long. They are Night's Watch men, black cloaks, black leather, faces that carry the particular expression of people who have been trying to make other people believe something important and failing at it for long enough that the failure has become part of the expression. They stop at the same roadside inn where John and Mira have taken shelter for the night, south of the Neck and north of the Riverlands. And they tell everyone at the common table what they have been telling everyone at every common table between the wall and wherever they are riding. The dead are walking north of the wall, men who died in the cold and came back as something that cold and arrows do not stop. Something vast and organized and moving south, slowly, the way winter moves south, as though it has all the time in the world. The men at the common table listen politely, and some of them nod, and none of them believe it. John watches this from the corner where he and Mira have been eating, and when the table has moved on to other conversations, he goes to the rangers and sits down. He does not give his name. He asks questions. He asks about the wall, the 3 castles still manned out of the 19 that used to be. Castle Black at the center, and Eastwatch by the sea, on the eastern coast, and the Shadow Tower, at the western end. He asks about what they have seen personally, not rumor, not report, what their own eyes have given them. He listens to the answers the way the Neck taught him to listen, completely, without interrupting, storing everything. The wall is 700 feet of ice, and has stood for 8,000 years, since Bran the Builder raised it, with the help of the children of the forest and the giants, to keep back what came from the far north in the age before memory. The Rangers say this not as a comfort, but as a context. 8,000 years is a long time. The wall has held for 8,000 years. The Rangers do not sound confident that the margin between held and will hold is as wide as it has always been. John thanks them and goes back to Mira. He says north. She says, I know. He says, beyond the wall. She is quiet for a moment, and in the quiet, you can see her doing the calculation she has been doing in her head for weeks, the one where she weighs what she is against what is needed, and arrives at the only answer that makes sense. She says, not beyond the wall. Not me. He does not argue. He already knew this too in the way. You know things that you have not said aloud, yet because saying them makes them final. Beyond the wall, she is a Cranachman girl with a net and a frog spear in a dead land, and the skills that make her extraordinary in the Neck become ordinary, or worse, in a country where the ground does not work the way she knows how to read it. She is not without magic. She is the Lord of Greywater Watch's daughter, and the people who live in the moving castle have their own kind of knowing. But it is not the magic of the far north, and it will not help her there. South of the wall is different. South of the wall, she is the daughter of the man who holds the gate through which the entire north must pass, and she carries in her pack a written account of events at the Tower of Joy, that in the right hands at the right moment, the truth needs a carrier, the truth needs someone who understands what it is, and what it is worth, and when to use it, and when to protect it. Mira understands all of those things. She has been carrying important things carefully, since she was old enough to understand that some things are more fragile than they look. She says, John. He looks at her. She says, if the world is going to need to know your name, it will need someone alive and free to say it. That is what I can do that you cannot, once you go north. He nods. He understands. They sleep one more night. In the morning, they stand on the King's Road, and they give each other the things they are giving each other. John takes his net from his belt and hands it to her. Folded flat, weighted at the edges, the net he has trained with since he was 7 years old. She takes it with both hands, and she does not make a ceremony of it, and neither does he. Then she reaches to her belt and takes out her hunting knife, bronze-handled, the blade worn smooth with use, the one the Lord of Greywater Watch gave her when she was 7 years old. In the yard of the castle, she puts it in Jon's hand. He closes his fingers around it and feels the weight of it, which is familiar, because he has seen her carry it every day of his life. He says, "Tell your father I'll come back." She says, "He knows. Jojen dreamed it." Jon says, "Jojen dreamed a lot of things." She says, "They all came true." Jon is quiet for a moment. Then he nods once. He turns north. She stands on the King's Road and she watches him go, a tall young man with a frog spear and a bronze knife and swamp mud already working its way back into the seams of his hide armor. And she watches him until the King's Road bends and the distance takes him, and then he is gone. She stands there for a moment longer. Then she turns south. Jon walks north alone on the King's Road. He is 18 years old. He has never been to a city. He has never ridden a horse, despite having spent a morning looking at a road through one's eyes. He has never spoken to a maester or a septon or a lord of the south, has never attended a court or a feast or any of the ceremonies by which the Southron world organizes itself and decides what it values. He has never seen a dragon. What he has is a frog spear and a bronze knife and a folded square of parchment inside his hide armor. The Lord of Greywater Watch's careful handwriting recording what happened in a tower in the Mountains of Dawn 18 years ago. Somewhere in a citadel archive in Old Town, there is a septon's journal that records a wedding before a heart tree in Dawn. And in that journal there is a name, Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name, true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. He also has the neck in him, 18 years of it. He carries it the way the ground carries water, completely invisibly in every layer of what he is. He looks like no Southron knight on this road. He looks like no Targaryen prince from the stories, no silver-haired figure out of the histories that the maesters write and the lords read in their keeps. He has dark hair and grey eyes, and the unhurried stillness of a person who has spent 18 years learning that the ground beneath you is always speaking, and the only question is whether you are listening. He looks like a tall, young man from the north, with unusual weapons and mud on his boots, and no one on this road gives him a second look, and this is exactly what the neck built him to be. Invisible until he is useful. Somewhere in the world, far to the east, across a sea he has never seen, there is another person born in the same year as Jon, in the same season, who also carries Targaryen blood, and also does not know yet what the world is going to ask of them. He does not know she exists. She does not know he exists. Whatever is between them is still beyond the edge of what either of them can see from where they are standing. The wall is 300 miles of ice, and 700 feet high, and it is holding for now as it has held for 8,000 years. Beyond it, something dead and vast and old is moving south. Jon walks north, not toward a name or a claim or the game that southern lords play with each other's lives as the pieces. Toward the thing that Rhaegar Targaryen believed his blood was made to face. If the Lord of Greywater Watch's account of the man is true, and the Lord of Greywater Watch has never told Jon a false thing in 18 years, toward the real war, which does not care about succession or legitimacy, or which family sits the Iron Throne, which will come for the living, regardless of what the living are doing to each other when it arrives. The neck could not hold him forever. It was never supposed to. It was only supposed to keep him alive long enough to be useful. He walks north, and the King's Road goes with him straight and hard, and sure of where it is going the way the neck has never been, and the sky above it is vast and cold and full